Tom Ryan enjoyed huge success in business, partly because he was the consummate entrepreneur, and partly because he was a pioneer in the early days of the radio and telephone communications industry. Not only was he in the telephone answering service business, he was also a pioneer in the paging business and owned a network of transmitters across Newfoundland. He was in the two-way radio business, and when they discovered oil offshore Newfoundland, Tom was there to provide two-way radios to the industry and the players in the oil industry, and made a lot of money off that. And as a matter of fact, he was the first one in Canada, I believe, to connect a telephone to a radio so that you could actually make telephone calls over a radio network. Now, this was long before it was legal in Canada, and for those our American friends, this would be tantamount to the Carter phone decision in the U.S. So, and as a result of that decision, he spent tens of thousands of dollars fighting the telephone company, Newfoundland Tel, I think it was called at the time, Newfoundland Tel, and because they didn't obviously want him to do that. This would be in the early 70s or mid-70s. He was also one of the original shareholders, the founding shareholders in Airphone, which was the air-to-ground radio network, installing telephones in airplanes across Canada, Air Canada. He was one of the founding members in the first nationwide paging company in Canada called Page Canada. And I think he was president of the Canadian Radio Common Carriers Association when they were negotiating with the government of Canada to introduce cellular telephones to Canada in the early 80s, and was part of a consortium to apply for a cellular telephone license at the same time. So, as a matter of fact, Tom and I were partners in the nationwide paging company and competitors in the application for cellular telephone license about 1983. But despite all of Tom's successes in business, that's not how I best remember him. I best remember Tom because when you were in his presence, he was one of those rare individuals, when you were in his presence, you knew you were in the presence of an individual who had honor and integrity. No, not just integrity, uncompromising integrity. You could trust Tom to the nth. He was one of those individuals who didn't try to be honest, he just didn't know how to be dishonest. It was not part of his being. And he was a gentleman. In the truest sense of the word, he was a gentleman. He was honest, excuse me, and he had integrity like nobody I've ever seen. A gentleman, and had a silent confidence about him. He wasn't a braggart. As much success as he had achieved in life, you never heard him brag. He wasn't outspoken. He wasn't gregarious. But boy, during a board meeting or during an assembly, when he got up to speak, the room would go, it would just hush. It was dead silent when he got up to speak. He was just a marvelous individual. And I personally am a better person for having known him. And the person who wins this award has to meet that criteria, and has to meet the criteria of a Tom Ryan, which is not an easy thing to do. And I think the winner of this award, I think it's probably the highest compliment you can be paid.